It was easy. I had like 4 wires I had to dig out. Found starter, found constant, found switch power. That's constant under cranking, which is important. And we're good to go.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and run this inside with the other brake lighter.
Sam's Garage is brought to you by Brothers Truck Parts.
If you could take me to 7-Eleven for a Slurpee, I'd really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, it's all right. I don't mind
taking. Spill any.
Yeah, no, not on this new leather. I won't let you spill any at all.
This is absolutely beautiful. Jay Stitch, Mike Lewis Rod and Customs, you guys did a phenomenal job with this car. The interior, the dash, the paint and body, everything looks absolutely beautiful.
And it drives wonderfully.
It drives
wonderfully. I mean, it is so smooth going down the road.
Sam and Kevin Ford will complete the final touches on the Buick Skylark.
Yeah, we got a whole assortment of them. We've got a 63 fuelie, 56 fuelie, 57 fuelie. This is more in our 14-inch Classic, which is kind of universal. This one we kind of tweaked up to look more like a Buick engine now.
You know what's cool is until you look at those exhaust ports, you would never even think that it's an LS.
You don't. You really don't.
Small block. Anytime you're doing something like an LS swap, you're going to make 400 horsepower. In our case, we're going to be making over 650. So you definitely need to replace the fuel system. Now, anytime you guys are doing an engine swap like this, it's a good idea to take some time and clean up the engine bay. We have minimal wires on our engine harness from the factory. The engine harness, the Holley fuel injection is going to be isolated from the car, except for an ignition wire. The important thing is when you're making 700 foot-pounds of torque, that's the key. People don't understand it's torque that breaks parts. Horsepower takes over on top end when torque falls off at 55 or 52.
Let's just map it out front to back, make sure we have everything we need so we don't have to leave and go get more
Always
stuff.
important to get more fittings. Always make sure that you have extra parts. You can always return those parts, okay? And we're going with Earl fuel system, fuel lines, fuel regulator, their hose fittings.
Yeah, the press lock stuff's unbeatable.
Absolutely, and it's good for ethanol. So anytime you guys want to run E85, just add a sensor and we're good to go. And if you guys don't have a knife like this at home and you want to cut your hose, you want to make it nice and straight, all you gotta do is take a hose clamp, put it over it, tighten it, take a nice sharp razor blade, cut it along the hose clamp, take that piece off and you got a nice clean cut. We went ahead and cleaned up the engine bay of stuff that we know we're not gonna need, just to give us an idea of where we can route this harness, because it is pre-made, and so it gives us less of an, have to extend a bunch of stuff. The easier you can make it and the less disturbed we can keep that harness, the better.
Right. Yeah, and a big part of this whole swap that we do with the LS Classic engine is to keep it looking as original-ish as we can. And so we're hiding all the wires, and we bring the plug wires in. We had to do that because we're going under the intake.
Exactly, we're going under the. Yep. And Flowmaster does a really good job by making the back half of the car's system for the car, but they give you the options up front to adapt to any long tube headers.
That's right.
It cannot go home without Low-Car products, because they've got what you need to adapt everything to the car, universal stuff like this, transmission oil dipstick. They make the products that make your engine swap able to be completed.
That's kind of the way I put it to everybody when they ask me what we make. I say, well, if you're putting something in something it didn't come in, you got to connect that throttle cable, you got to connect the brake cables, you got to get the oil in the dipstick, We do all that kind of stuff, and it really helps and makes the project easy, and it's all flexible and cut and fit.
And their quality, their life. This is a pretty painless deal. It's just time consuming. And the further you put the coals away in a nice, safe, dry area, or if you're going to put it where weather is, make sure your connections and everything is weatherproof, the more it's going to look period correct, okay? When you can't see those coil packs and you're over here scratching your head thinking, what's going on?
Yeah, and that's why we're routing them down under the intake. Yeah. It won't be as noticed, you know, once we put the air cleaner back on there, it kind of just disappears.
Absolutely.
When we return, Sam and Kevin plan to crank up the Buick Skylark. Sam's Garage is brought to you by Brothers Truck Parts. Sam's Garage is brought to you by these fine companies. Welcome back. Sam and Kevin finally start up the engine in the Buick Skylark.
All right, looks like we're almost ready to crank this thing. We've gotten everything taken care of except for a couple things, because whenever you're doing an engine swap, the first 90% takes 100 hours, the last 10% takes 120, because you got so many finalization. Like for instance, we still need an overflow tube here. Right. We need a vacuum hose here for the heater valve. We got a small leak on our heater core because it is 50 years old, and one of the nipples are pinched off. So we got some things to do. Actually, you do, and but we did good. We did good.
It's why waste our time with those things when we can hear this thing fire up, right?
This is so exciting, you know, 650 horsepower in this thing, and hopefully it'll start up and run like we want it to. All the components fit so perfect, and I know it's gonna run and last as long as they fit.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff that Holly provided for this has been phenomenal. I'm just taken back by how well everything fit, how well it works, the computer, how much it's going to give to us flexibility-wise and tuning-wise.
Drivability, fuel economy,
that's right.
Huge. The cooling, we got a 180-degree thermostat in this. The fans are going to come on at 210 degrees. It will never get over 215. Yeah. I bet you can take this thing across country and stop at a few drag strips on the way, right?
Sure, and maybe we'll win.
That'd be cool. Let's go ahead and weld the LS differential back there so you can have posies in the back. Now, you guys want to go through and make sure that when you do a job like this, like we've talked about this whole time, clean everything off. Don't let heat destroy your investment, especially a stainless steel exhaust. It's a nice Flowmaster 3-inch expensive exhaust. Takes a lot of time and labor to install something like that. Go back before you do anything, take some brake cleaner and a nice rag and wipe all fingerprints, anything oily residue on your exhaust off. Then go through this nice air cleaner and nice chrome valve covers, the aluminum fan shroud over the radiator. Clean everything off.
Well, in case anybody's wondering why we didn't clean some of this, that's the look.
Exactly. This is the ultimate sleeper in my opinion.
Yeah, and we, you know, as an advertising tool as well, we want our LS Classic engine to stand out, and that's kind of the idea here. You open the hood, why is this thing here? Yep. Because of this.
Exactly. That's why we kept the coffee can reservoir. We even kept the original alternator's voltage regulator on the firewall just to fool folks. And then when you get home, he's going to hide all that computer, all the wiring, so that when you look up under here, you got the original factory harness right here, powering up a few things for us, but it'll look factory.
Yeah, I mean, at a glance, you're not going to,
no way you can tell. Unless you see this, you're paying attention to those two little letters, you wouldn't tell.
That's right. It's going to look like you fixed it up.
You guys did a great job with this LS Classic series.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
That.
All right, let's fire it up and see if it runs. That's gonna hit that's a big cam. The Holly still needs some learning. There's gonna be some fine tuning for us to do with the handheld, answer a few questions, drive it a little bit, up to 1,000 miles for this self-learning system to really get, you know, acquainted to the way you drive.
Sure, and of course all this smoke is just from everything being new and fresh.
Yep,
it's nothing unusual.
Well, we're about to drive this thing up on the trailer, just like we said we would before we started.
That's right, I doubted you, but look at me.
Awesome. Good job.
Be sure to stick around because after the break, Sam and Doug Harris will fire up the Hudson Hornet. Up next, Sam and Doug Harris will fire up the highly anticipated Hudson Hornet.
All right, so this is the moment of truth. Now, you guys already saw this car running on the engine run stand, but we've already put it in the car now. We don't have a wire harness. We talked about Doug is going to remake the wire harness. Hopefully, you'll do a good job and it'll run when it gets back.
I'm going to try.
Okay, that'd be great.
6 volts, don't forget.
6 volts, don't forget.
Yeah, well,
6
I
volts.
use thinner wires.
Now, what we did was we hooked up our starter, we hooked up our generator, and we pretty much have alligator clips to the coil to fire it up, and we're jump starting the starter cylinder with the battery. And we have our timing light hooked up to 12 volts because it's a 12 volt timing light, all right? And I got Wade with Merlin Auto Group. This is the gentleman that rebuilt the carburetors and the distributor on the distributor dyno, which is cool.
Right.
A lot of people today don't know what that is. And he's gonna come in and he's gonna help us dial in the carburetors. Even though Doug knows how also, he's got the tools to make sure they're both balanced. And Doug, you used to do it the old fashioned way with your hands, correct?
All hands, yeah.
There you go. Thank you, Wade, so much for coming on board with us. What are you going to do first?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Well, first thing we need to do is just get it fired up and see how it runs. And once it's fired up, we'll check the timing, make sure the timing's kind of close. Then we have a Unisync, which is a little device that tells me how the carburetors are flowing. You'll see that the chokes are closed right now, so we're going to need to let it warm up a little bit. Once it warms up, chokes open. And if it's synced up, we're good to go. There's a couple of screws on the bottom. We can make sure there's enough fuel for it to idle. But hopefully after the fire up on the stand, this thing's going to fire up easily and we're just going to make it happen.
And that's why I got Wade on board with us, because everyone knows I'm a fuel injection man. I don't know carburetors. That's why I say carb, because it's easier to spell. So let's go ahead and get started and tune this thing in.
All right.
Do you want me to loosen the screw at the base here so you can move it and put it atop the center and have that adjustment for final tuning?
So let's go ahead and get it spun over, see what the timing is. I guess you stabbed it in kind of close, did you?
Yes, sir.
Good. Go ahead. Let's do it.
Thank you, Doug, for noticing there was trash in the gas. And Sam, if you would have listened to me, we'd have been way farther ahead.
Cool. And then say thank you, Sam, for building the baddest car ever.
Thank you, Sam, for building.
Wade, this thing sounds awesome. Thank you so much for doing a great
You're
job
welcome.
on tuning it up. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's great, Wade. I appreciate it. Tremendous job. Just
Thanks,
tremendous.
Doug. I really appreciate you having me.
We got heat, we got 50 PSI oil pressure, our timing is set, it idles on its own.
Yep.
Now, we did have to go over a little hurdle as far as fuel goes.
Yeah, apparently they don't really run on water. We found that out, but you know, we got that solved.
We just got a little bit of contaminated gas, but we dealt with it, we hurdled
Yep.
over it, we're good to go. Now, do you have any tips on people who want to do this at home, dialing in a pair of carburetors and or timing their distributor?
Well, I think one of the most important things with the distributor is we set it up on the distributor machine. If you didn't have the distributor machine, we would be trying to start this car, get the point set, get the timing set, verify the advance curve. With the distributor machine, it's plug and play.
That way you know it works, you put it on, that's one variable out of the equation.
Right, and there's not a lot of them left in the country, you know, so you're gonna have to find somebody that has one, but it's worth it.
Now describe the tool that you use to balance out the two carburetors.
So the Unisync is a very simple little tool that just has a little bobber that floats with the air that passes through, and you can adjust how much air passes through for the particular carburetor, and it floats. And when you get it in this spot, you put it to the next carburetor and you make sure it flows the same. That's all there is to it. The magic is making sure it flows the same, not the tool, but you do have to have the tool to tell you. Or you could do it like Doug used to and just kind of stick your eyeball down in there.
Yeah, okay.
He's been bragging about that all week.
That's
Don't
right.
remind him.
No, it's the hands. It's all
This
about
is
the
just
hands.
faster.
Well, there you go, guys. This Hudson is running well. All we got to do is complete the exhaust system. It needs a muffler, a tailpipe, and a midpipe. All I did this morning was make us a downpipe so we can tune the engine, and he's not getting blasted with exhaust. So the next thing we have to do is button everything up and go to the great race, right?
That sounds great.
That's going to be fun.
When we return, Sam and Doug Harris will get into the details overviewing the Hudson Hornet restoration. Welcome back to Sam's Garage, presented by Brothers Truck Parts.
Well, Doug, this Hudson really came together. Last season, we tore this thing apart. It was in really bad shape. The body wasn't in bad shape. There was no rust. The floor plans are all cool, but underneath was dirty, sat in the barn for 20 years, and we really did a good job on this.
Oh, this thing absolutely came out spectacular. When I think of what we started with and where we are today, I've been sending my father pictures. He's been looking at this. He's absolutely amazed. You know, the quality of the paint and the interior, the leather. I mean, it looks like it just came off a showroom floor.
And you know, we got this Hudson done in a year's time. Not even, like probably 11 months time. And that's due to the fact that we had so many people involved helping us. One, we had Wade from Merlin Auto Group. He came on board last year and showed us how to rebuild the carburetor.
Absolutely.
Then we had the boys at Mike's from Lewis Rod and Custom, and they did a great job on the body and the trim work and everything, right? Then we had Don Ewing from Ewing Auto Machine. He built us the motor. He did a great job with that, right? And then we have Bob's Classic Auto Glass. He supplied us with all the glass. Now the glass is the last thing that's going to go in because we have to make sure that we do it right. We need the bottom channel rubbers for the bottom of the window. We couldn't get those in time, and we were not about to skip that step because we want to put the glass in one time because the interior is going to go in for the final time once we do that, right?
You bet, you bet. You know, and the amazing thing with the glass that we've got, it is so difficult to get glass for a 54 Hudson Hornet. I mean, I'm impressed that we were able to get all of this and pull everything together for this beautiful automobile. I mean, it's really something special.
It's a classic, and check out that emblem, it lights up. Now you guys with your new Benzes think you're cool with your front emblem lighting up. This is a 54 and that thing lit up. That's pretty cool.
You know, and the great thing about the seats, you know, I climbed in the car, I got into the seats, talk about comfortable. I could take a nap in the back seat, it's so big, it's wonderful.
Jay Stitch from Jay Stitch Upholstery did a great job with the interior, the headliner, the carpet. He did it all with the car not being in front of him. He made all the panels from scratch, had to remake the foams for the seats, covered everything in leather, suede headliner, very nice job.
Yeah, you know, and over the years, I've built a lot of different automobiles. I've restored a lot, I've raced a lot. Watching him do the headliner is a work of art because when you take a look at it, it's the suede material that he put into it and how he cut it and fit it and did everything. Man, that's incredible.
It takes a lot of patience. And Terry and Cole over at Wild Rick, you guys did a phenomenal job with supplying us with everything that we needed for this Hudson. When I started this process, I had never restored a car like this before, or even restored a car. I'm a mechanical guy. So for me to have to go through and do all the research and find all the parts and go to Wild Rick and guys like Bob's Classic Auto Glass, he knows everybody. His wife drives a daily Hudson. He's got like 12 of them. Very cool dude. And he was so helpful. Paul Townsend from Paul's Transmission, thank you so much for doing the transmission for us. And the guys over at Miller Powder Coating did a good job with the powder coating. This is our intakes. This is, you know, basically a muffler on the intake. That's the carburetor side. And the air filter, back then, they would just fill this in with fiberglass mesh, the same fiberglass mesh that you would see in your HVAC system in your house. So what we would do is fill that back in and put it together. But anytime you guys have powder coating done, you're doing some beautification on your project, always make sure to check for media residue. Okay?
Absolutely.
Had we not shook this, we wouldn't have remembered or known that there was sand in there, and this is the intake. That would have been catastrophic.
Yeah, and one other thing for you guys that are doing this, make sure with all of your fuel lines, any type of lines that you have, make sure they're clean, they're blown out, you run fluid through them because you get all kinds of particulates in that. Then you get ready to do your fire up and all of a sudden you're struggling. It could be struggling in your brakes, struggling in your carburetor. You'll have things because your lines are dirty.
Absolutely.
That kills a lot of restorations because then after it's all together, they have to tear it apart and find out what's wrong.
And another good tip is when you're working on something this old and you're going through the brake lines, the fittings on the brake lines. Now normally you would always use a line wrench because that's what you're supposed to do. You grab most of the bolt and it's supposed to work fine. But in our case, the line wrench actually rounded off the nut, and we used the old-fashioned vice grip, and it worked great. I thought we were gonna have to make new lines, and you came in and said, you know what, use the vice grip. And I'm like, yeah, but that's sort of a no-no. But for you guys at home, you may not have line wrenches, and so you have to use a vice grip. In our case, it worked perfect.
Yeah, and especially when you take an old fitting like that, the metal gets old, they get a little bit of corrosion onto them, the metal begins to fatigue. What you're able to do, grab it with the vice grip, they crack right off. You know, when they built these cars, they were way ahead of the times. They dominated NASCAR. we're gonna have a sweet ride. It's gonna be smooth and nice going down.
It's gonna be comfortable. I'm gonna be the navigator and you're gonna drive me around. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I can't wait.
On this episode of Sam's Garage, Sam and Kevin completed the Buick Skylark project, and we got to see them start the engine for the very first time. We also saw Sam and Doug start up the Hudson Hornet and provide an overview of this car's restoration. Thanks for tuning in to this season of Sam's Garage.